Pretty much every front page this morning is all about the weekend's events. Sarah Everard's family talking to The Sun, saying that her murder should bring positive change in protecting women. The shaming of the Met is what it says on the front page of the Daily Mail. The Guardian, defiant Met chief refuses to quit, hits out at armchair critics. Defiant Met chief on the front page of the Times as well. I mean, it's all pretty ridiculous. I mean, my take on it, first of all, before we talk to Dehenna Davison, was that everybody in this kind of whole scenario was in the wrong. Some people did it for good reasons, other people did it for bad reasons, but everything that happened at the weekend really was completely, for me, utterly needless. Let's talk to Dehenna Davison, Conservative MP for Bishop Auckland. Dehenna, very good morning to you. Welcome.
Morning, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Not at all. I mean, it's been a very difficult weekend for so many reasons. What's your sort of take on what happened on Saturday and where it all went wrong?
Well, without being there, Mike, it's hard to know exactly how the chain of events unfolded. I think it's quite right that the Home Secretary has asked for a full report on the events of what happened at the vigil. And you know, we've all seen some of those shocking images of what looked like, you know, from those snippets, quite kind of heavy-handed tactics. But again, we've heard that 26 police officers were injured. I don't envy any police officer trying to police a protest, let alone in a time of pandemic. You know, I just want to make it one point really clear kind of before I go on, that what happened to Sarah Everard is horrific. And I think what it's done is opened up the confidence of a lot of other women to share their experiences and share their thoughts on what is, frankly, an epidemic across our society of sexual harassment, sexual assault, and a lot of women being too afraid to speak out. And had we not been in a time of COVID and of pandemic, I would have attended the vigil myself. I think it's really important that women and men stand together against some of these horrific injustices. But the point was, the organisers of the vigil asked for it not to go ahead based on kind of public safety advice, public health advice. And as you I think you used the phrase "rent a mob" earlier in your opening, Mike. Unfortunately, there were people there who perhaps weren't necessarily there for the right reasons, who were there to protest, who were there to cause trouble. And I think what that's done is unfortunately undermine the very cause that most people were trying to fight for.
Well, I think when you see hordes of people chanting "F the police, no justice, no peace," as they did last night as well, outside of Downing Street, I mean, it's pathetic, isn't it? Because it just takes you... I mean, last night, again, as I was driving back up to London, I was hearing reports of the police having to protect the statue of Winston Churchill. And I found myself thinking, what on earth has this got to do with the horrific, ghastly murder of a young woman?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I read something yesterday, which was, I think, from one of Sarah's friends, saying that she was really disappointed by how her friend's death had kind of been hijacked in this way.
Yeah.
And that's right. What we've got to remember is this is a young woman who was walking home and had this tragic thing happen to her. Her family and her friends and her loved ones are still grieving that. We cannot allow this to be hijacked by people who had a hidden agenda. This has to be about doing what's right to ensure that women feel protected, that women feel safe, that the criminal justice system is there to punish people who commit any of these horrific crimes, be it sexual assault or what we've seen happen to Sarah. And it's about having that conversation now. It's about getting everyone around the table, men, women, policymakers, victims, perpetrators, making sure that we are doing whatever we can to make our streets safer, to make women feel safer, and also to ensure that prosecution's going ahead the way they should be.
Yeah, and there's no question that I think anybody would disagree with any of that, Dehenna, but I think also we've got to be a bit careful here of not making out that, you know, horrendous and ghastly acts of criminal intent and murder will continue to happen. They do happen. They don't happen, thankfully, very often. You know, the Yorkshire Ripper was a lorry driver. We didn't start talking about banning all lorry drivers from driving around Britain. You know, Fred West was a builder. We didn't say Fred West is a builder, therefore all builders should be, you know, somehow investigated to see whether or not they've got any dark thoughts. You know what I mean? And I think in this day and age in which we live, there is a certain hysteria that kicks in where people go, well, it's all, you know, their fault. Let's make the streets safer. And, you know, up to a point you can do that. And I get the idea of people's attitudes changing and all of that. But, you know, I've never been a person who treats women badly, ever, in my life. You know, there might be one or two women that have known me who would disagree with that, but you know what I mean. You know, I've never, you know, I was talking to my sons about it the weekend, both teenagers, the older one starting to kind of go out with girls, and, you know, it would never occur to them to sexually harass anybody. Do you know what I mean?
Completely. And that's why I think, you know, the ridiculous calls from the Green peer saying that we should put all men on curfew after 6 p.m. in the evening is completely ludicrous. Just, I mean, I'm not even going to go into all of the reasons why it would be completely unworkable and ridiculous, but you're exactly right. You know, we have to be careful that we're not tarring everyone with the same brush, that we're not saying everyone's a bad guy, because the vast majority of people are good, honest people with good intentions, just trying to live their lives in a fair way. But, you know, there is a problem out there. You know, I don't think, I certainly would never suggest that all men are the problem. That's not the case.
No.
But certainly with the vast majority of women who do face sexual harassment, sexual assault, rape, etc., it does tend to be from men. And we have to be realistic about that. We have to be realistic about the facts and the figures and the statistics.
Yes, we do, so but equally, we have to be careful not to misuse those statistics, because, you know, this is a government that consistently tells us that they're driven by the data, which we'll come on to in a minute, you know, but people misuse data all the time. You know, there's plenty of men that get assaulted by other men, not necessarily sexually, but sometimes sexually. You know, I was molested as a boy on the tube years ago when I was about 12 years old going to school by a bloke. You know, stuff like that does happen to men and boys as well.
Well, I was about to come on to that, Mike. I was about to say that, you know, we have to be very clear that when it comes to sexual assault and assault in general, this isn't just an issue that does affect women, though. You know, we see there's huge issues across the LGBT community with this. And obviously, you know, the campaign I'm running on one punch assaults, which tends to be a bloke on bloke kind of issue. So I think it's a much wider conversation we need. You know, I'm really pleased that the Home Secretary has reopened the consultation into violence against women and girls as a starting point, and that the Prime Minister will be chairing a meeting of the Crime Task Force on violence against women and girls. But I think it needs a look more broadly at society and how people treat each other, but also how that criminal justice system is making sure all of those cases right across the board are being heard properly and fairly.
Absolutely. And it's not a good look for the police, is it, for what happened on Saturday night? I mean, neither one of us was there, and that's true, but we have seen some of the things that happened because they get recorded on film. And regardless of whatever the provocation was, you know, to see police officers, male police officers, manhandling women protesters, vigilists, whatever you want to call them, sticking them face down in the park. I mean, it just doesn't look very good, does it?
It's certainly not good optics, Mike. You're right. Obviously, as you said, we weren't there. We're going to have to await the outcome of the report from the Met. You know, for the most part, I think our police officers are incredible. The job that they do, and they're doing under such intense pressure at the moment, is incredible. That's why I'm really pleased that as part of the policing bill that we're introducing, we're actually rolling out the police covenant, making sure that our police officers are properly protected, getting the support they need, both while serving and into retirement. But I think, you know, this does raise questions about kind of appropriate use of force. And I'm hoping that in that report, you know, a lot of those questions that people have right now, and questions that I think people fairly have, will be answered.
And I wonder whether this weekend's events will kind of shine a light on the craziness and the kind of ridiculous situation that the police find themselves in, where they are effectively trying to impose lockdown regulations, trying to stop people from breaching those regulations because they might be considered to be causing danger to people, by causing even more danger to people, by getting close to them, by allowing groups to kind of huddle up together, by making forming a ring around the bandstand in Clapham Common. You know, I mean, it's obvious to anyone looking at that from the outside that the rules are ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, I don't pretend to be an expert on kind of operational policing. You know, I thought as a kid I might want to go into the police force, but it's not something I ever pursued. And I think it's right that police forces do have that operational independence to kind of choose how they do police these situations. But, you know, it's a time of pandemic. It's something that's so unprecedented. And as I say, I don't envy them at all and praise them. You know, praise the.
No, but what I'm saying is effectively, Dehenna, is it that you don't have to be an expert in policing to know that if they are trying to enforce a law which is supposed to keep people apart, but by enforcing that law it forces people closer together, then evidently and obviously it's madness.
But it's an impossible situation this pandemic's put us in. I think everyone's just trying their best in the circumstances.
And what about this this bill that's before you guys in Parliament today and tomorrow, which is a kind of a brushing up, I suppose, of where we are? It may indeed extend more police powers. It may limit them. What is it about, and what are you going to vote for?
Well, I'm going to be voting with the bill, firstly because it was one of our manifesto commitments that we, get tougher on crime, tougher on sentencing, making sure that some of the most violent and heinous criminals serve much longer of their sentences. So for, the most violent crimes and the most horrific crimes, people are currently, will serve half, and then it's reviewed. That's going to be up to 2/3, which I think is absolutely the right approach. There's going to be more done to help kind of protect women and domestic abuse victims. We're looking at pre-charge bail so that we don't see an incident that happens again, like what happened to Kay Richardson, where her partner was released under investigation and then killed her in the time in which he was released. There's a lot of really good stuff in this bill. And as I outlined earlier, the police covenant, making sure our police officers are properly protected, that retired police officers are looked after, that special constables can actually join the police federation and have the kind of perks and benefits of that and the support of the police federation. There's a lot of really good, strong, proper conservative stuff in there. So I'm going to be backing this bill 100%.
Okay. But what about the other issue, which I mentioned last week, around this whole Sarah Everard situation, whereby an awful lot of the people now who are complaining about men are the same people who would campaign to release prisoners from prison on the grounds that they've all been rehabilitated. And one of the problems for me about releasing sex offenders, for example, is that they tend to reoffend an awful lot more than other types of criminals. A rapist will come out of prison and will more than likely rape somebody again. A sexual assaulter will probably sexually assault somebody again. And my worry is that there's too many of those kind of people out on the street because they've been freed by what I regard as our rather over-liberal justice system.
Well, right from being a kid, I've always believed in tough justice. I think it's important because, what is a prison sentence for? I mean, 1, it's there to act as a deterrent. 2, it's there to act as a punishment. And 3, it's there to act as protection for the public. People need to remember that, when people are talking about early release, etc. They're the 3 factors that influence, why people would get a prison sentence, and the 3 factors that are there about why prison sentences are used. So for the most violent crimes, for the most heinous crimes, for murderers and rapists, it's right that they're serving a long time in prison to punish them, but also to protect the public. I do think there's an argument for some sort of restorative justice. I think there are some people who can be rehabilitated and won't offend again. But actually, in some ways, I think that's an argument for actually keeping them in the system for longer, to allow them more time, more support, more counselling, more therapy to actually help them rehabilitate and get themselves on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen, does it? I mean, that's pie in the sky. I mean, it's nice that you think that way, but I just don't believe that people who do that kind of crime will ever be rehabilitated. It's like saying somebody who commits a sexual assault on a child is not going to do it again. I mean, I've interviewed paedophiles, and they say to me, I can't stop what I do. There's nothing that stops me doing it because I'm sick in the head.
But this is precisely why we are extending that sort of minimum time served in prison from half to 2/3, which I think is absolutely the right approach. Then obviously the sentence, it's then reviewed about whether or not they'd be released based on kind of threat to the public, etc. I think there's a wide conversation to have about sentencing overall, but we're in the constraints of the criminal justice system we have and the current sentencing framework. I think we're doing what we can to try and improve that. We're increasing some of those sentences. We're keeping people in prison for longer for the worst crimes. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction, Mike, and that's exactly why I'm backing the bill this week.
Well, that's good, because a lot of people voted for the Tory party back in December 2019 for the purposes of law and order, amongst many other things that they wanted you to get on with. What do you make of the arguments going on at the moment as well about the right to protest? Because there's an awful lot of people who are moaning now that they didn't have the right to protest at the weekend when they didn't care about anybody else not having the right to protest when they were shut down, when they tried to have like anti-lockdown marches, for example. There's a very big double standard going on here, isn't there?
There is. I think people have really, really strong views on this matter, depending on kind of which side of the argument they're on. I firmly believe in the right to protest, much as it can be annoying, much as it can be mildly disruptive, much as my office faces down onto Parliament Street where loads of the marchers go by and it's really frustrating. I believe in the right to protest. I think it's really important in a democracy. But there is a point at which those protests become dangerous. They become disruptive to everyday people's way of lives. You know, they start blocking transport networks. They try and block deliveries from printing presses. There are points at which legitimate protest steps over the line. And I think it's absolutely right that our police need the powers to be able to crack down on those when they do get to that level of disruptiveness.
Yeah, but what I'm saying to you, as you well know, is that there are plenty of protests that did take place last year which were not disrupted, and in fact which the police regarded as so kind of saintly that they should kneel down before them.
No, I agree with you, but that's the point. It has to be about disruptiveness. And once again, you know, it's not my place to talk about the operational independence of the police. There were some scenes we saw from the police last year that I was surprised by. And I think some of those protests did take a nasty turn at certain points. And that's why the police need the powers to be able to act, so that if those protests do reach a level of disruptiveness that becomes harmful to the public, they have the powers to act and they're able to do so, break up those protests, make sure everyone's safe.
Do you think Cressida Dick should resign?
Not my job to say, to be honest, Mike. You know, I don't know.
You can have an opinion on it. It's all right.
I can have an opinion on it, but at the moment, I don't think I've got enough of the facts to be able to have a strong and valid opinion.
But she's not exactly what you would call a great leader, is she? I mean, from the beginning of her career, and I don't know if it was the actual beginning of her career with the shooting of de Menezes in a tube station after the bombing of 7/7, all the way up through to the dancing of the police with Extinction Rebellion, to her clapping on a bridge for the NHS without being socially distanced from people. I mean, she's accident prone. She doesn't appear to have any consistent policies. And I don't see any justification why she should stay in the job, to be honest.
Well, I don't know, Mike. As I say, for once as a politician, I'm going to kind of plead the fifth on this one, just in the sense that, you know, I haven't followed Cressida's career enough to be able to have a really strong and valid opinion that I'd be able to back up with enough evidence.
Okay. Well, let me ask you one final question then. Lockdown. I'm, as you know, a great advocate of freeing up the economy sooner rather than later. All we get out of the government at the moment is we're following the data, not the dates. But the data is telling us, basically, that we've got fewer COVID deaths, we've got fewer COVID admissions to hospital, we've got massive amounts of vaccines doing the rounds and getting out there. I think we're in better shape now than we've been since about last October. You know, why on earth do we have to wait? And there's a lawsuit now going on from hospitality. Why on earth does hospitality have to wait until May before they can make any money?
Well, you know me, Mike. You know that I want to get things unlocked as soon as possible. But I really kind of do stand behind what we heard Jonathan Van Tam say, in the sense that there is going to be a lag in the data at each stage of the unlock. We need to see what the actual impact of that is on cases, on hospitalizations, on the impact on the NHS. And that's going to take a few weeks to really sink in. And that's why we've got the time frame that we've got. I know it's really hard. I know how much I'm, you know, kind of missing my family. I know how much, you know, I want to get back to the pub. I know how much these businesses are suffering. That's why we've put in place such a kind of extensive support packages. We've got the restart grants. We're really trying. But I think we really do need to follow that data and give the data time to manifest so that we really know the impact of it before we move on to the next stage.
Yeah, but you know, when you actually take time out and look at the rules as they are, and I did this at the weekend and came up with a rather ridiculous or Monty Python-esque scenario, because apparently now you can have a funeral at which 30 people can attend. So your loved ones, your friends can attend an event with you as long as you're dead, but they can't do it if you're alive.
I think we need to recognise that funerals are such kind of dark but important occasions. You know, I would hope that I'm able to have a birthday party next year because I didn't get one this year or whatever. But a funeral is a one-off. A funeral is a very difficult time all round. I think it is a different circumstance.
Do you? I mean, my mother's 97, for example. I can't see her because she's in America. It's pretty important I do because she might not be around for very long.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. I can't imagine how hard that must be, Mike.
Well, it's very hard. It's very difficult. I spoke to her yesterday, and she's really upset that she hasn't now seen me for over a year. And normally I see her twice a year, you know. And that's very tough. Yeah. And I just think that, you know, I'd like to know that politicians are taking time to think about stuff like that.
Well, we're certainly taking time. This entire year has been a year of kind of soul searching, reviewing what's important and trying to do what's right in a time of such kind of quick evolving circumstances. It's not been an easy one, but I can assure you we're all just trying to do the right thing.
Okay. Dehenna Davison, thank you very much indeed. Conservative MP for Bishop Auckland there on the events of the weekend. She doesn't know whether Cressida Dick should resign because she hasn't really followed her career enough. And that's fair enough. I mean, you don't have to go out on a limb on it. I think she should. I think she's been completely and utterly useless. Let me just put that down there on the record in case you're in any doubt. Cressida Dick, you are a disgrace. This is talkRADIO.